Jace Carter groaned as he woke up on the cold, hard ground. His head pounded, and his vision was blurry. The last thing he remembered was a diplomatic banquet on the warlike planet of the Varkai. There had been food, strange music, and some kind of strong alien drink. A loud horn blasted through the air. Jace's vision cleared just in time to see thousands of alien warriors gathered in a massive stone arena, cheering and shouting. High above them, banners waved in the wind, all bearing the same emblem, a golden blade crossed with a burning star. He was in a battle arena. In front of him stood Zaria Kor, the Varkai general. She was tall, fierce, and carried herself like a born warrior. Her sharp golden eyes studied him with frustrating amusement. "Finally awake, human," she said, cracking her knuckles. Jace sat up quickly. His heart pounded. Yeah. Mind telling me what's going on?" The warriors in the stands laughed. Zaria tilted her head. "You accepted my drink last night. The cup of unity." Jace blinked. "Yeah. And?" "The cup of unity is a sacred marriage vow in my culture." Jace's blood ran cold. "Excuse me. What?" The crowd cheered again. Zaria smirked. "By Varkai law, you are now my mate." Jace shot to his feet. "That's insane. I didn't agree to." Zaria held up a hand. "If you refuse, it will bring shame upon my clan, and my people do not take shame lightly." Jace gulped. "How not lightly are we talking?" She gestured around the arena. "If you wish to leave, you must prove your strength in battle." Jace exhaled slowly. Of course, this is happening." A massive gate opened on the other side of the arena, and 3 armored warriors stepped out, each holding a giant weapon. The first warrior had a hulking frame and wielded a spiked hammer the size of Jace's torso. The second warrior was lean and fast, gripping dual plasma daggers that crackled with energy. The third warrior held a massive blaster rifle, aiming straight at him. Jace clenched his fists. He was unarmed, alone, and hungover from alien booze. "Great," he muttered. "Just another Tuesday." Zaria crossed her arms. "Survive this trial, and you will be worthy of standing beside me." Jace took a deep breath. Running wasn't an option. Fighting these guys head-on. Suicide. He needed a plan. The hammer-wielding warrior charged first, swinging down hard. Jace rolled sideways just in time. The hammer slammed into the ground, sending cracks through the stone. Before the warrior could recover, Jace grabbed a handful of loose dirt and threw it into his eyes. The crowd gasped. The warrior stumbled back, blinded. Jace grabbed his arm and twisted, using his own weight against him. The huge warrior tripped and fell, hitting the ground with a thunderous crash. The second warrior lunged with plasma daggers. Jace dodged left, barely avoiding the blades. He spotted a loose metal pole on the ground, probably from a broken banner. He grabbed it and spun just in time to block a dagger strike. The energy from the dagger surged through the metal, but Jace twisted his body, redirecting the shock back into the warrior's chest. The warrior yelled in pain and collapsed. Now just one left. The blaster rifle guy. Jace turned, too slow. The warrior fired. Jace dived behind the fallen hammer warrior, using him as cover. The energy blast slammed into the huge man's armor, knocking him unconscious. Jace spotted the dropped spiked hammer and grabbed it. He ran forward and swung with all his strength. The hammer smashed into the blaster, shattering it. Before the last warrior could react, Jace kicked his legs out from under him. The warrior hit the ground hard and didn't get up. The arena fell silent. Then, a roar of approval. The Varkai warriors cheered wildly. Jace, panting, dropped the hammer and turned to Zaria. "Okay," he said between breaths. "I survived. What now?" Zaria smirked. "Now, you prove yourself in my home." Jace groaned. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Her golden eyes gleamed. Oh, immensely. Jace Carter limped through the towering gates of Zaria's home, trying not to collapse. His arms ached, his legs felt like lead, and he was pretty sure he pulled something important in his back. The trial by combat had nearly killed him, and yet here he was, still alive, still breathing, still, apparently married. "This place is nice," Jace muttered, glancing around. The fortress was built into the side of a massive mountain, with long stone pathways and huge banners hanging from the walls. Torchlight flickered against carved statues of past warriors, and at the center stood a great hall that looked part throne room, part war chamber. Zaria walked ahead, completely unbothered by the fight that had nearly crushed Jace's ribs. "Follow me, mate," she said over her shoulder. Jace sighed. "Could you stop calling me that?" She smirked. "Would you prefer husband?" Jace groaned. "I'd prefer a guy who isn't part of an alien marriage misunderstanding." Zaria laughed. "Then you should have fought twice before accepting the cup of unity." Jace rubbed his face. "Look, where I come from. Drinking something together doesn't equal marriage. Otherwise, my whole college football team would be legally bound." Zaria stopped at the entrance to the great hall. She turned to him, arms crossed. "Then tell me, human, what does marriage mean to your people?" Jace hesitated. He hadn't expected a serious question. "It's about choosing to stand by someone," he said finally. "Not because of a tradition or a rule, but because you want to." Zaria's eyes flickered with something. Curiosity, maybe. Before she could reply, the doors to the great hall swung open. Inside, a massive feast was laid out on a long wooden table. Plates were piled high with roasted meat, exotic fruit, and steaming bowls of something that smelled spicy enough to melt metal. The Varkai warriors who had been watching the arena now sat inside, laughing, drinking, and slamming their fists on the table in approval. One of the older warriors, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, raised his cup. A toast to Zaria's mate. May he be strong enough to survive her. The hall erupted in laughter. Jace forced a strained smile. "Oh yeah, I love this planet." Zaria nudged him toward a seat beside her at the head of the table. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Jace frowned as he picked up a chunk of something roasted. "For what?" "More fighting." Zaria took a sip of her drink. "For surviving the next challenge." Jace froze. "There's another challenge." Zaria grinned. "Yes, my mother arrives tomorrow." Jace nearly choked on his food. "Your mother?" The warriors laughed again. Zaria leaned closer. "She is the matriarch of the core clan, the one who decides if you are worthy." Jace ran a hand through his hair. "Oh good. A mother-in-law trial. Just what I needed." Zaria's smirk grew wider. "She is not so different from me." Jace stared at her. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." Jace Carter had fought off battle-hardened warriors, dodged spears, and survived a near-fatal misunderstanding. But nothing could prepare him for meeting his mother-in-law. He stood at the entrance of the great hall, his shoulders tense. The entire fortress had gone silent. Even the warriors who had spent the last night roaring in laughter now sat stiff-backed at the long table. Then the doors swung open. A wave of authority swept through the room as Lady Varkana entered. She was tall, commanding, and walked like a queen. Every step she took echoed, and the warriors lowered their heads in silent respect. Her piercing gaze locked onto Jace immediately. "So," she said, her voice like polished steel, "this is the human who claims my daughter." Jace raised a hand in greeting. "Ahai. You must be." She cut him off. Silence. Jace snapped his mouth shut. Lady Varkana slowly circled him, inspecting every inch of his form like a general studying a battlefield. "He is not very large," she commented. Jace scowled. "I'll have you know I'm above average on my planet." Zaria smirked but said nothing. Lady Varkana narrowed her eyes. "Do you even understand what it means to be mated to a core warrior?" Jace rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm learning." Lady Varkana scoffed. We do not learn. We prove ourselves. Jace had a bad feeling about this. Let us begin, she declared. The warriors straightened up, anticipation in their eyes. Jace sighed. All right. What's the test? Another fight? A puzzle? Maybe a cooking competition? Lady Varkana smirked. A hunt. Jace blinked. A hunt. Zarya leaned closer. My mother wishes to see how well you handle yourself in the wild. Jace frowned. Define wild. Lady Varkana turned toward the doors. With a simple gesture, they swung open, revealing a vast alien jungle beyond the fortress. Jace swallowed hard. Oh, that wild. Lady Varkana handed him a long curved blade. Survive until sundown, she said. If you return with a worthy kill, you may keep your place by my daughter's side. If not, she let the silence speak for itself. Jace turned to Zarya. Do you seriously have to do this with every suitor? Zarya smiled. No, only the difficult ones. Jace sighed. Of course. Then, with the weight of 1,000 bad life choices, he stepped into the alien jungle. The moment he entered, the heat hit him like a wall. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, and the trees stretched high, their glowing vines twisting like serpents. Jace gripped the blade tighter. Okay, no problem. Just find a worthy kill before sundown. Easy. A low growl rumbled from the shadows. Jace froze. 2 glowing eyes appeared in the underbrush. Or I could just try not to die, Jace muttered. The creature lunged. Jace barely rolled out of the way, hitting the dirt hard. He scrambled to his feet, blade raised as the massive predator circled him. It was all teeth, claws, and muscle, its snarl vibrating through the ground. Jace exhaled. All right, big guy. You want to be my worthy kill. The beast charged. Jace dodged, slashing out with the blade. The weapon barely nicked its hide. Great, he muttered. I brought a butter knife to a monster fight. The beast lunged again, and this time, Jace didn't dodge. He dived forward, sliding beneath its body and slashing at its exposed underside. The creature roared, stumbling. Jace rolled to his feet, heart hammering. All right, he said. Let's see if humans can prove themselves. Jace's breathing was steady, but his heart pounded like a war drum. The beast prowled in a slow circle, its glowing eyes locked onto him. The wound Jace had inflicted wasn't deep, but it was enough to make the creature cautious. All right, big guy, Jace muttered, gripping the curved blade. I just need to take you down before you take me down. The jungle around them buzzed with strange noises. Somewhere in the distance, a bird-like creature let out a long, eerie screech. Leaves rustled overhead, but Jace didn't dare take his eyes off the predator in front of him. The beast lunged again. Jace rolled to the side, barely avoiding the massive claws that raked through the dirt where he'd been standing. Without hesitation, he swung his blade. This time, he aimed for the tendon behind its front leg. The weapon sliced deep. The beast let out a bone-rattling roar, stumbling as its leg gave out. Jace saw his chance. He charged forward, jumping onto the creature's back. It thrashed wildly, nearly throwing him off, but Jace clung on, wrapping one arm around its thick neck. He drove the blade downward, aiming for the vital spot at the base of its skull. The creature bucked violently. Jace's grip slipped. In a flash, he was thrown off, slamming into the ground. Pain shot through his ribs, but he had no time to recover. The beast turned, blood dripping from its wounds, its snarl filled with fury. Jace gritted his teeth. Fine, you want to go another round. The beast lunged. At the last second, Jace ducked low and thrust the blade upward. The creature's momentum carried it forward, straight onto the blade. For a moment, everything was still. Then the beast collapsed, its massive body shuddering before falling silent. Jace lay on the ground, staring at the dark sky peeking through the jungle canopy. That sucked, he groaned. But he'd done it. He'd survived. And he had his worthy kill. Dragging the massive corpse back to the fortress was a nightmare. Jace had to cut vines to tie around its legs, and then haul it inch by inch. His muscles screamed in protest, his entire body covered in sweat and dirt. By the time he stumbled into the fortress courtyard, the sun was setting. The warriors had gathered, watching in silent disbelief as Jace dragged the beast forward and let it drop with a heavy thud. Jace leaned against it, catching his breath. There, proved myself. A ripple of amazed murmurs passed through the crowd. Lady Varkana stepped forward. Her sharp gaze scanned the fallen beast, then shifted to Jace. I expected you to return empty-handed, she admitted, or not return at all. Jace wiped sweat from his forehead. Yeah, well, humans are full of surprises. Lady Varkana's expression was unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded in approval. You have earned your place, she declared. The warriors let out a cheer, pounding their fists against their chests in respect. Jace turned to Zeria, who had been watching with her arms crossed. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. He grinned. See, told you I'd impress your family. Zeria tilted her head. You barely survived. Jace smirked. Details, details. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You are either the bravest or the most reckless man I have ever known. Jace held her gaze. Can't I be both? Zeria's smile widened. Perhaps. Jace exhaled, rolling his sore shoulders. So, what now? Do I get a medal? A feast? Lady Varkana's voice cut in. Now, human, you prepare for the next challenge. Jace blinked. Wait. There's another challenge. Zeria chuckled. Did you think winning my hand would be easy? Jace groaned. You aliens and your tests. Zeria smirked. Better get used to it. As the warriors laughed and the fires in the great hall roared to life, Jace knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The fortress hall was alive with celebration. The great fires burned high, casting flickering golden light on the stone walls. Warriors clashed their cups together, their deep laughter echoing through the chamber. The scent of roasted meat, exotic spices, and strong alien wine filled the air. Jace sat at the long table, feeling every sore muscle in his body. His arms were covered in small scratches from the jungle battle, and his ribs still ached from being thrown to the ground. But it was all worth it. He had proven himself. And now he was sitting at the warrior's table, a place of honor he never thought he'd earn. Zeria sat beside him. Her usual sharp gaze softened, just slightly. She had watched him all evening, almost like she was studying him in a new way. Lady Varkana, her mother, finally spoke. You fought well, human. Jace exhaled, shaking his head. Appreciate it, but I'd rather not do that again. One of the warriors, an older man with battle scars on his arms, laughed loudly. You say this, yet you still live. That means you will fight again. The table erupted in cheers, and someone shoved a large metal cup into Jace's hand. Drink, another warrior insisted. Jace looked at Zeria. Is this stuff going to kill me? She smirked. Possibly. Jace sighed. Great. Still, he took a careful sip. The drink burned like fire going down his throat, and he coughed violently. The warriors roared with laughter, slamming their fists against the table. Zeria raised a brow. You survived worse today. Surely you can handle a simple drink. Jace wiped his mouth and grinned. Oh, you're enjoying this, aren't you? Zeria leaned in slightly. Maybe a little. Jace felt his heart skip. It wasn't just her words, it was the way she said them. For the first time, she wasn't just challenging him. There was something else in her voice, something curious. The feast continued, and soon, the warriors turned their attention to Jace again. A younger fighter smirked. Tell us, human, What is your species truly made of? Another warrior chuckled. Yes, we have seen your survival skills. But what else? How do your people fight? How do they love? How do they win their wars? Jace leaned back, crossing his arms. Oh, so now do you want human secrets? The warriors laughed. Lady Varkana nodded. If you are to be one of us, we should know what makes your kind worthy. Jace tapped his fingers on the table, thinking. Then he smirked. All right. You want to know what humans are made of? He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a dangerous secret. We are stubborn as hell. Zaria tilted her head. Stubborn. Jace nodded. You can knock us down, throw us into impossible situations, break our bodies. But we always get back up. Always. The warriors exchanged looks. Jace continued. You saw it today. That jungle. That monster. It should have killed me. He pointed to his chest. I should be dead. But humans don't quit. We keep going, even when it doesn't make sense. Silence settled over the table. Then the old warrior from before grinned. You are either a fool or a true warrior. Jace grinned back. Both. I'm both. The warriors laughed, and another round of drinks was poured. As the night continued, Jace caught Zaria watching him again. For the first time, she wasn't looking at him like he was just some outsider. She was looking at him like she was starting to understand. And maybe, just maybe, she was impressed. Jace woke up to the sound of distant drums. His head throbbed, and his muscles screamed in protest as he sat up. The warrior's drink from last night had hit harder than expected. Humans are not built for that stuff, he muttered, rubbing his forehead. He barely had time to process his pain before a sharp voice snapped him back to reality. You're late. Jace looked up to see Zaria standing in the doorway of his chamber. She was fully dressed in her warrior armor, arms crossed, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. For what? Jace groaned, stretching his sore limbs. Zaria tilted her head. The trial of the blade. Jace blinked. The what? Zaria let out a slow breath. You proved yourself in battle, but my people still doubt you. They think you won out of luck. She stepped forward, her eyes locked onto his. So, you will take the trial and prove them wrong. Jace sighed. Why do I get the feeling this trial is going to hurt? Zaria smirked. Because it will. Minutes later, Jace stood in the center of an open training ground. Around him, warriors formed a circle, watching with keen interest. The ground was marked with deep scars from past battles, and the air smelled of steel and sweat. Lady Varkana stood at the edge of the circle, her expression unreadable. The trial of the blade is simple, she announced. You must face an opponent and land a single strike on them. One clean hit. Jace exhaled. That's it. Just one hit. Lady Varkana smirked. Yes, but your opponent is Zaria. Jace froze. He slowly turned to Zaria, who was already gripping two curved blades, spinning them lightly in her hands. Of course, it's you, Jace muttered under his breath. Zaria raised an eyebrow. Afraid. Jace rolled his shoulders. Terrified. The crowd laughed, but Zaria didn't. She simply stepped into position, her stance light, controlled. Then come at me, human. Jace took a deep breath. This was impossible. Zaria was faster than him, stronger than him, and had been training with weapons her entire life. He had no chance. Unless. Jace grinned. All right, let's do this. The moment the trial began, Zaria vanished. Or at least, that's what it felt like. 1 second she was in front of him. The next, she was moving, blades spinning, footwork impossibly fast. Jace barely had time to dodge as a sharp swipe cut the air inches from his side. She wasn't trying to hurt him, but she was definitely trying to humiliate him. Jace ducked, rolled, and twisted to avoid each strike, but Zaria was relentless. Every attack was a test, and every dodge felt like a desperate gamble. The crowd murmured, clearly enjoying the show. Jace had to think. He had to stop playing her game and start playing his. He remembered what he told the warriors last night. Humans don't quit. Humans adapt. Zarya lunged, expecting him to dodge like before. Instead, Jace did something stupid. He ran straight at her. Zarya's eyes widened for half a second, just long enough. Jace dropped low, sweeping his leg underneath her. She jumped to avoid it, just as he expected. But Jace wasn't aiming for her legs. He threw himself backward mid-spin, twisting in the air, and tapped his hand lightly against her side. The crowd went silent. Jace hit the ground hard, coughing. But when he looked up, Zarya was standing still, a look of pure disbelief on her face. He had touched her. One clean hit. Lady Varkana's voice broke the silence. The trial is complete. The warriors erupted into cheers and laughter. Some clapped, others shook their heads in amazement. Jace grinned, still catching his breath. Told you, humans adapt. Zarya was quiet for a long moment. Then she extended a hand to help him up. When he took it, her grip lingered. You are full of surprises, she murmured. Jace smirked. And I'm just getting started. Jace sat on the edge of a stone platform, rolling his sore shoulder. The trial of the blade was over, but his body was still paying the price. The warriors had cheered, some had laughed, and a few had even clapped him on the back hard enough to nearly knock him over. Now, the celebration had died down, leaving only the soft hum of the night air. Zarya stood beside him, arms crossed. You should be resting. Jace smirked. I'm fine. She gave him a doubtful glance. You're barely holding yourself upright. He chuckled. Okay, maybe I feel like I got hit by a starship, but I've been worse. Zarya didn't laugh. She was quiet, watching him with an unreadable expression. Jace sighed, tilting his head back. All right, what's on your mind? She hesitated before speaking. Today, you earned their respect. Jace turned to her. But not yours. Zarya's lips pressed together, but she didn't look away. I have always respected your spirit, Jace, but today you proved something more. Jace sat up straighter, ignoring the ache in his muscles. And what's that? She exhaled slowly. That you are not just here by accident. You fight for something. And that is dangerous. Jace frowned. Dangerous. Zarya took a step closer. My people see strength in battle. They see courage in survival. But what they fear is change. Jace ran a hand through his hair. Let me guess. Me being here is changing things. She nodded. You are not like them. You are not like me. You fight in ways they do not understand. You think in ways they do not expect. And now, they do not know what to do with you. Jace chuckled. Well, they could just accept me as the charming, adaptable human that I am. Zarya didn't smile. Jace, you do not understand the full weight of what you have done. His smirk faded. Then explain it to me. Zarya took a breath. There are those who will see you as a threat. Not because you are weak, but because you are strong in ways they cannot predict. They will not challenge you openly. They will watch, wait, and test you. Jace leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. So what? They'll make me fight more trials. Zarya shook her head. No. They will test your heart. Jace's breath hitched slightly. He suddenly felt the weight of her words settle in. This isn't just about me, is it? He asked softly. Zarya's gaze didn't waver. No. Silence stretched between them. Jace exhaled. All right. Say there are people who don't like me. What do we do about it? Zarya studied him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she knelt before him, placing a hand over his. Jace blinked. Zarya. This is a warrior's promise, she said firmly. You have fought beside me. You have stood against those who doubt you. And now, I stand with you. Jace's heart pounded. He wasn't sure if it was from exhaustion, adrenaline, or something else entirely. Does that mean we're on the same side now? He asked, voice quieter than before. Zaria's grip tightened. We always were. Jace swallowed. He hadn't expected this moment, hadn't expected the depth behind her words. He grinned, trying to lighten the mood. Well, I gotta admit, if I'm gonna have an alien warrior watching my back, I'm glad it's you. Zaria smirked. Do not make me regret it. Jace chuckled. No promises. But deep down, he knew something had changed between them. Something real. Jace stood at the edge of the training grounds, watching as the twin moons cast silver light over the alien city. The air was cool, carrying the distant hum of celebration from the central halls. Tonight had been a victory, his victory. But instead of feeling triumphant, his mind was tangled in thoughts. Zaria stepped up beside him. She didn't speak right away, just stood there, her presence steady and strong. Jace had come to understand that sometimes silence between them meant more than words. You're thinking too much, she finally said. Jace let out a dry chuckle. Yeah, well, I got a lot to think about. She crossed her arms. You won the trial. You gained their respect. What troubles you now? Jace exhaled. That's just it. What happens next? Zaria was quiet for a moment. You tell me. Jace turned to her. I don't belong here. Not really. I mean, I fought. I survived. But I don't know if I fit into this world. Zaria's gaze didn't waver. Do you wish to leave? The question hit harder than he expected. Did he? For weeks, all he wanted was to prove himself, to stand his ground. But now, faced with the idea of leaving, he wasn't so sure. Jace rubbed the back of his neck. I don't know. Zaria stepped closer, and for the first time, there was something softer in her voice. You have done more than survive, Jace. You have changed things. Whether you see it or not, you have left a mark here. He met her eyes. And what about you? She blinked, as if caught off guard. What about me? Jace smiled. Have I changed anything for you? Zaria held his gaze for a long moment. The warrior in her wanted to stay unreadable distant, but there was something else, something deeper, that flickered in her expression. Finally, she spoke. You fight like a fool, you argue without fear, and you refuse to submit. Jace raised an eyebrow. Gee, thanks. Zaria smirked. But you also make me see things differently. Jace's heart pounded. He hadn't expected that answer. Zaria continued, her voice steady. You ask questions that no one else does. You challenge things that others accept without thought. And despite everything, you stand by your own beliefs. Jace swallowed. Is that a good thing? Zaria's smirk softened. It is dangerous. Jace chuckled. You keep saying that. She tilted her head. Because it is true. Silence stretched between them again, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. There was something unspoken in the air, something neither of them had the words for yet. Jace took a deep breath. So, what do we do now? Zaria looked up at the sky. You have a choice. If you wish to leave, you will be granted safe passage. No one will stop you. Jace hesitated. And if I stay? Zaria turned back to him. Then you must walk forward, knowing that nothing will ever be the same. Jace smirked. Yeah, I think I figured that part out already. She studied him, waiting. Jace ran a hand through his hair. He had no idea what the future held. But there was one thing he was sure of. He wasn't done here. He glanced at Zaria, a grin tugging at his lips. Guess I better stick around then. Zaria exhaled, almost as if she had been holding her breath. Then we move forward, she said simply. Jace chuckled. You know, you're really bad at emotional speeches. Zaria rolled her eyes. And you are really bad at keeping quiet. Jace laughed. Yeah, Well, guess you'll have to get used to that. Zaria smirked. I already have. As they stood under the twin moons, side by side, something unspoken settled between them. A new path, uncertain yet undeniably real. And Jace was ready to walk it.